Welcome to Stay a While, the podcast that's virtual soul food for your ears. I am your host, Tommi Vincent, and each week we break bread with bold, passionate women who have faced the impossible and are still standing to share their testimonies. Make yourself at home and stay a while. Hi, everyone. This is Tommi Vincent, your host of Stay a While podcast. And today we have joining us at the table Angela Ellis. Angela is the Vice President of Original Content and Entertainment for the NFL. Prior to that, Angela was the executive broadcast producer at ABC's Good Morning America, leading to Emmy wins and #1 ratings. Interestingly enough, Angela transitioned from a long career in the news industry over to the sports side, and we'll talk about that more in our conversation. But Angela, before we go there, I would like to know from you, who is Angela Ellis?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. First, thank you, Tommi. Happy to be on Stay a While. I am a genuine person who has had a lot of experiences, I was going to say has led, but I'm going to say actively, is leading an extraordinary life where each phase of my life I've uncovered new parts of myself. And I think where I am now at 50, I'm bold and happy to say that Angela is a confident person who is someone who sees herself of service, who approaches both her professional life from a servant leadership standpoint and how I can kind of fulfill a leadership role, but by bringing people, helping elevate people and bring them up, and in my personal life as well, how I can be of service to this world, to my family, and really embracing and knowing that that is, I feel like, my God-given purpose, and have learned that over the course of many years in my life, but really in the last, I'd say, 5 to 7 years, it's become crystallized and really knowing who I am and standing in it.
Now, you have had an extensive career in this space of media, and there has been a journey to get where you are today. Is this something that you always knew you wanted to do, or was it a career that found you?
As early as college, I knew I wanted to do it. Before, I think growing up, I went through a phase. I think it was just kind of this thing that I had with my older sister. Like, she wanted to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, and she used to tease me like, "You're going to work for Jacoby and Myers." And for some reason, I thought, like, I would start crying. I was like 8 years old. No, I'm not, Stephanie. I'm sure they're a lovely firm. They still exist. So after the lawyer phase, then like all through my preteen and teen years, I really wanted to be a fashion designer and would spend, hours drawing and designing, went to design school in the summer. I can't sew, still can't sew. And that kind of felt like a barrier to that career. So college is when I got someplace and kind of heard this one thing. I think it was second semester freshman year, and it was the first class in a media and communications department, and the professor said the most powerful people in the world are those who control information. And I was like, oh, sign me up for that. And from that point on, I knew I wanted to be in media. I wanted to tell stories. I knew I wanted to be behind the camera, being the one who is sharing information and choosing information and how to tell it to people.
What was your very first job in the industry?
My first job, I guess internships aside, I was at CNN in San Francisco for a while as an intern, and a few other places. My first job was actually at ABC. It was while I was in grad school. So after I graduated college, I moved to New York and went to Columbia Journalism School. And my last semester there, the last bit, overlapped with a job at ABC. And so that was the first time I worked at ABC. I was a production assistant. There was this news legend, Carol Simpson, who was on the air. She was the only Black woman anchor. She did the weekend world news, and just had always had this groundbreaking career. So it was amazing. So I was a PA on her show, and that was my first entry into a very fulfilling but very hectic and stressful at times industry in news and breaking news.
So that's the part I was going to talk about. Like when you're young and you're bright eyed and bushy tailed and looking forward to this work, and then you get into it and you realize there is a hierarchy to, the industry. And so when you're at the bottom, if you will, there are some things that come along with that territory, and there's a lot of grunt work that takes place in that process. Was there ever a time where you was like, you know what, this is not for me?
No, actually, I loved it. And I'll say, Tommy, that's one of the things that like really gets me now with, I start to feel old saying like this current generation, like hard work. As soon as something's like, oh, it's a little hard, or I have to stay here like a little extra hours, they out. I loved it. I embraced it. In that job, like really getting a chance to learn, put into practice things I had learned in college and in journalism school, but actually doing television, doing news, is a whole different thing. And so it was just more learning opportunities. So I would just keep raising my hand. And that job was probably maybe 3 months. I really count my first like full on in the industry job. It was right after I graduated from Columbia. I started at NBC News and I worked for Dateline. And that was like another master's program. I learned so much. And in the same way, I embraced I'm the lowest on the totem pole here, whatever you need me to do, because that way I can absorb and learn everything. And in media industry, and especially at this time in the late 90s, there was still, we're working off tape, and it was a lot more involved to get content than it is now. You can easily just punch something up and look on YouTube or whatever. So doing all the research, finding old video, going through the video libraries. The first huge project that I had, or big news story when I started at Dateline, was the death of Princess Diana. And that was an all hands on deck. Nobody has any off days. We're here around the clock because this is just going to be rolling. And so I raised my hand and volunteered. I said, I can order all of our archive tapes that have anything that have to do with Princess Diana and the royals. And I will log all of them, meaning sit there, watch them, type out the time code, describe what's happening, transcribe who's saying what, and then catalog them by category of Diana and fashion, Diana and charity, for kids. Do you know how long that took me? I was there hours and hours, overnight, for days, but I learned a lot. It made me indispensable because every producer, and ones I really respected who were, pretty high up on the rung, I had all these people coming to me like, where can I find this? Or I could suggest to them things because I knew it better than they did. So it became an advantage. And ever since then, I might still roll my eyes of like, oh God, this is so hard, or this is so annoying, or like, I really want to go home because I am someone who enjoys sleep. But I never shirked away from it.
Did somebody teach you that? Was that a knowledge transfer about just stay the course and be grateful in the process, that this is just part of it?
Yeah, I think overall my family work ethic. I grew up in this we always say like this clan of eight. Out here I'm originally from Los Angeles, but my mom's side is from Tennessee and St. Louis area, and my dad's side is from Louisiana, and they all somehow ended up here. And I had this really great upbringing with all four grandparents. Never had babysitters because while my parents were working, they would alternate picking me and my sister up from school, and all of them, from the grandparents to my parents, instilled in me and my sister, the whole thing that a lot of people of color, and especially Black people here, you have to give 110% just to be seen as good enough to walk in the door. But you can do whatever you want. Just put in the work, and the world is yours. So it was kind of like not even a question. That was the ethic. And then I think there's also a part of my personality that's very much like, okay, what do I need to do to achieve this thing? And at sometimes that could mean, what do I have to do to achieve this life goal? And in my early 20s, I was very like, pop, pop, like 5-year plan. I want to do this. I want this role. Or for me, it was every 2 years. I ended up being promoted every 2 years. So then I'm like, well, it's already happening. So let me make that a goal to keep happening. I've since way calmed down from that type of stuff. But I think I just embraced knowing that it was getting me to, putting in the work was getting me to an end. Sometimes that end was, if I can finish this, then I can go the heck home or do what I want to be doing, which is not being at work. So sometimes, especially even now in these days, I'm like, I get stuff done quickly, on time. People often comment like whenever there's, a group project and we all have some piece of it, I'm one of the first to have it done. It's not because I miss like A type. It's like, cause I want to go, I want to go home, or I want to go see my friends, or I want to be with my family or do something else. So in some way or function, it's basically putting in the work so I could reap the benefits and reach some other side, some other goal.
Can we talk about your transition from the news industry into the sports industry, especially since you had such a long stint in the news industry? It's almost like going into a whole new career, if you will. And so can you just talk us through that and what that was like for you?
That was to say when I first had the invitation to come on, stay a while, and the description about overcoming challenges to get to where you are, and I've had questions like that before, sometimes on panels, like what are some big hurdles you faced in your career, and it always drives my sister crazy whenever I'm like, I haven't really had any because I'm kind of good at what I do. And people always seem to know that. It's like, I never really had any of those big, barriers. She did, but she was also in a different field. Like she was in science and medicine and, and dealing with I don't know, we just had a different experience. But then I thought, well, let me not look so back over, across my entire career. It's really been since I'd say it started 2017. I was at Good Morning America, and I had been there approaching 10 years at that point, which wasn't expected for me. When I started there, I was a freelance producer. I'd come off another role for ABC on a show that I loved. It got canceled. They wanted to keep me, but the only thing they had was Good Morning America. Before that, I had worked, like I said, at Dateline, so longer form, hour-long storytelling, in-depth storytelling. In between, I moved to Italy and was working there, and in Egypt doing documentaries, long form. The show I worked on for ABC was, longer form. And then here comes, okay, we have this temporary job at Good Morning America. Take it, and we'll find a spot for you after. I'm not a morning person, or I wasn't at the time. I didn't really like morning TV. It didn't feel like the right fit, but like, okay, I'll do it. I'll stay a while, just a short while. Fast forward 10 years, I kept getting promoted every 2 years. I was kind of like dragged like by the momentum of my own, like, I know I'm good at this, but like, do I want to do this? So by 2017, the answer I was starting to crystallize as no. Like, I know I'm good at it, but I'm not enjoying this. This isn't fulfilling for me. And then I got promoted again. And that kind of changed a lot to that last title, the one that you mentioned, executive broadcast producer, meaning I ran, it was a 2-hour show. So I ran all of the first hour. So a lot of, all the hard news and breaking news and political news. And in 2017, if you remember that time period, and after the 2016, elections and kind of going through then, we were all politics all the time. So it was getting harder, and both the topics that we were doing, school shootings, mass shootings, it was starting to get to me. And then the responsibility of being in that role, I took it seriously and did well at it. But it was again, like, do I want to do this? And I had a mentor at ABC who said, keep going. Like, you're going to be the first Black executive producer of Good Morning America. And I was like, man, don't put that. And this is a white man who told me this. And I was like, don't put that weight on my shoulders. Like, I don't, like, maybe I should want that. And there's some people who think that I should. And I know that that would mean a lot to a lot of people, but I don't want that. And I don't want to keep kind of seeing my life just kind of flash before me by the momentum of my work ethic. So by 2018, I had decided it was time for me to move on. And then that was my limbo period. And then this is where I think I forged the new Angela that I am now, because that ended up being almost 2 years of trying to figure out. I didn't leave news. I knew I didn't, it wasn't just GMA. I wanted out of news,
Mm.
but I didn't know what, for the first time ever. I always knew I want this job, this place. I didn't know what it would be. And I certainly didn't think sports, because I'd always been a casual sports fan. I played basketball, but in high school. Um, Dated a football player all 4 years of college at Cal, go Bears, and was the assistant to the event manager. So I would be down on the field on the sidelines with the little Gatorade kids. I was their little manager. So I loved college football, but I wasn't a huge, sports fan. And those 2 years, look, it's again, with hindsight of seeing how God was working in my life, because I was trying to force things and make jobs happen. I thought I wanted to work at Netflix, and literally they wouldn't let me in the door. And I was trying to say, like, I have transferable skills. I haven't done this before, but I can do this. And they're like, literally didn't let me up from the lobby. Some woman came down to talk to me in the lobby and was like, bye-bye. And I had to let go. And then I get a text from a recruiter saying, have a job opportunity at the NFL. And so one, because it was a text, I thought it was spam, so I deleted it. And I'm like, my mama didn't raise no fool. Then I got an email, and it seemed more legit. And my first reaction was, because this was early 21.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was still coming off of late 20, George Floyd, when Black people were getting so many opportunities, rightfully so. But also they were just like coming left and right, all these like big jobs and things that sometimes weren't even right for your experience level, but like they were just, creating all these opportunities. So I had been used to kind of fielding all these things, and a lot of them weren't right for me. And I thought this was one that wasn't. And I said, thanks for reaching out. I'm sure I have people in my network that, that might be interested. And thankfully, the woman said, can we just have a conversation? We want to talk to you for a reason, and just hear me out. And me deciding to take that call, again, that was God, because it turned out to be this now is, I'd say, it's been a dream job, but it's also been, I think, one of my favorite jobs. And I never saw it coming. I never would have known to pray about it, to ask for it, to target it. It just came up. And I think, as women can often do with, if you don't hit every single point on a job description, you kind of discount yourself or like take yourself out of the running. And I realize now, after being here, that job description, like they didn't even know what they wanted. They just kind of put everything in there. It was a new department. And I thought, okay, at first I was like, I don't know about this. And then I said, okay, let me reset. This is basically what I've been doing. It's storytelling. It just happens to be storytelling about players and about the game. But the role that I was doing in the department that I was leading wasn't about, live games or having deep football knowledge. It was about, who are these players? Who are these teams and fans when they're off the field? What are they doing in their communities? Who are they as people? What are they passionate about? And I was like, well, I know how to do that. And so I talked myself into really wanting this job, and then pursuing it as if I really wanted it.
Mm-hmm. So you get to do what I believe is really critical for the game, and also the men who are playing the game. And now, with flag football, there's the emergence of really elevating women on the football field as well. But you get to take the helmets off and take the jerseys off and really present them as human beings, and to tell the story that actually got them to where they are today, and help to provide them the motivation and the drive, and present the why of why they are successful or were successful in this space. And I really value that, knowing that, Troy, my husband, who has extensive experience as a player and as an executive, there's so much to him that I love about him that's endearing to me, and just the type of man that he is, that doesn't get to show up in those spaces. But they really are his core values, his non negotiables, and drive him to be the excellent steward of the game that he is, as well as, the lover of the the players and everything that makes the NFL what it is. And so I appreciate that role that you have in all of the projects that you've done. And I know you love them all. But is there one that when you think about it, you just really feel good about presenting that story?
It was one from last season. Our NFL 360, one of our long form storytelling platforms or franchises that we have here, and it was the indelible legacy of Jimmy Ray, and
Mm-hmm.
it was about Jimmy Ray, and it was Troy who brought the story because your husband likes to text a lot and would just one word things like Jimmy Ray. Okay, sorry. So I'm Googling because, again, not like a depth of football knowledge. So first, every time he would text, I have to like Google something like, yeah, he was like, the first black quarterback in this, like, and you want me to do what? We need to, capture his story. He's getting older and like this needs to be, on the record. And so working with one of our great producers here, Osahan Tongo, and one of my team leads, Dallas Hitchcock, and they run NFL 360. They came up with how to tell Jimmy Ray's story, and I got to be a part of that as, the executive in charge. So the feature itself just turned out wonderfully, and all credit to them for how they produced it and told Jimmy's story
Mm-hmm.
and wove it through to today of how, because of him, we see all these black quarterbacks now, but like how he was the first and was part of this underground railroad that was coming from the South going up to Michigan, and how that like kind of opened up this world for black players after that. But why I'm so proud, one, just of the story itself, and that we got it out there. We won an Emmy for that as well. It's one of the ones
Congratulations.
up strategically up in my corner. I don't have my shot like that for nothing. There's two other on the other side that you can't see. But also we did this great event, and it felt like a bit of a coming out party for me because it was my second Super Bowl. So, still, relatively new in the league. And it was that Super Bowl week, and we did a premiere VIP screening of the indelible legacy of Jimmy Ray, and had, players, and it was at, when we were in Phoenix, one of the universities there, they had a new Sidney Poitier film school, and it just opened. So we did the screening there, had a panel with Jimmy Ray and the filmmakers. Your husband was supposed to be there, but had wrong directions and
I
got
heard,
frustrated
listen,
and
I heard
turned
all about
around.
it.
And I was like, where's Troy? But he paid for the event, so thank you for his department for that. But it was a real moment for me, I think, feeling like I had arrived in this world of sports and storytelling and how they converge, and standing up on that stage and introducing the filmmakers, introducing Jimmy Ray. It was kind of like this pivotal moment for me, I think, in my career, because I realized then, I think, how much fun I was having doing this job, and I
Hmm.
hadn't felt that in a really long time at work.
And you arrived with an Emmy, like, yes, I'm here. I'm here. You talked about how when you were in the news industry, you lived overseas for some time in Italy, and you've had experience in other countries. How has your worldview, because that's a different perspective, you've been in other countries, so you're seeing beyond the lens of the United States. How has that impacted your work as a content creator?
It's a good question. I think it helps you keep an open mind because there are so many different walks of life. It actually is twofold. One, it keeps you open to like different ways people have of thinking or doing things, motivations for why they do it, whether it's culturally based or their family, or just kind of the national way of doing things, and which you don't really think
Mm-hmm.
about sometimes when you're just in one environment, and especially Americans, how, we can very easily think that we're the only way of doing things, especially when it comes to work, and our really, live to work instead of work to play ethic. I really enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
being in Italy where it was the opposite of that. Even though I worked really hard, they were very good at, like, but when you're off and you're enjoying family and food and friends. Um, but then the other side of the coin is having lived in these different places and met so many people, both from that experience of living abroad, but also just in the career that I have of, being a journalist and being in media, traveling and interviewing so many different people, even here, like in different places in the country, like up in the hills in Appalachia with a self-described hillbilly. Like I'd never seen a world like that, just like I had never seen, underneath, tombs underneath the sands of Egypt, and, working
Mm-hmm.
with, foreign archaeologist crews. But all of those different groups of people, there were still like common human stories of love or pain, overcoming something, having a dream. Um, you start to like see those common themes, and kind of taking it back to where I am now and our helmets off approach. As different as, players might be, or teams might be, or groups of fans, we all kind of, the thing that we say about, football is that it brings us all together. It has like some common themes that unite us, like rooting for the underdog, overcoming strife, working hard.
Mm-hmm.
I found the same in how having so much exposure to people kind of boiled down some like common fundamentals, where even if you may not even totally understand the language or the accent that they're telling you their story in, you can still relate because there's like a common humanity there.
So you talked about in one of the things you miss overseas about they call it a siesta, where you're off in the, you know, they enjoy their time
2 hours.
off, and you
Yeah.
talked about how
Mhm.
you talked about how even now when you're doing your group projects at work, you're like, no, I finished because I want to go home. So we understand you enjoy that part of the job just as much.
Mhm.
What do you do on your downtime?
Well, a lot of it. So I moved back to LA in 2020, and my parents have always stayed in LA. My sister now lives in Seattle. So when I moved back from New York, they're 10 minutes away, which is both a blessing and a curse. Sorry if they see this. It's very close. Both 10 minutes from work and 10 minutes from my house. So like they can catch me on the way in or on the way out. So as they age and, are in their mid to late 70s, I spend a lot of time with them, but I also really enjoy their company. They're very fun people. I think I'm maybe almost a year into golf. I just started. I'm still learning, taking lessons, but really loving it. So that's been kind of like taking up a lot of my free time in a way that was actually unexpected, because I had like hit around a couple of times and was like, I don't get it. And it seems stupid. And then I had that experience of like, I hit one really great one. I was, and so I've been chasing that feeling ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But I like, just trying different things. And sometimes I go through phases. Last year around this time, I was in a tango phase, which I had gone through about 10 years ago, and decided I'm going to start taking tango classes because I just want to keep, just doing different stuff. Um, I live by the beach, so I like to spend a lot of time outside, going for walks,
Mm-hmm.
riding my bike. Um, but just kind of pretty basic things. I'd like to say like, oh, I like to travel, I like to do this, but work realities, maybe that's once or twice a year. I do still love, going abroad and exploring places, but I think my regular downtime is the things I mentioned, and I'm a homebody. I love, but not like, introvert is I love my home. I kind of have it decorated like it's a resort. I always thought I would have
Girl, I'm coming over.
listen, it's meant to be an experience when you come in. I've got spa slippers and everything, and it's just like it's all like, shades of like cream and white and stone. It feels like you're in where I love being in the Mediterranean. And so I'm like, so I want my home to feel that way. and it's my sanctuary. And I have my spot where I can look out. I live in the marina, so I can like look out, see the water, see boats going by, have a big screen TV, could be watching a game or watching a movie. And like, that's my sweet spot. And sometimes I have to force myself to get out of it. I don't have kids. I'm a very dedicated auntie to both blood related children and kind of universal auntie to many different friends and now coworkers. Um, but I enjoy my solitude. But I have to
Mm-hmm.
sometimes force myself out of it to make sure I'm having other interactions. But that's how I recharge from like, giving a lot to my parents, giving a lot at work. I like to volunteer. So I feel like I tick all those other boxes so I don't feel guilty when I do, which I think, as they're calling it now, couch rot.
Mm.
Sounds bad, but I call it hermit days where I'm like phones off. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be in my spot or in my house, enjoying my space. Hermit time.
Mm-hmm. Now you said your sister, she's in the medical field.
No, she, at the time when she was going through her toughest career, she also did a big pivot, but she was studying to go to medical school and was working in
Oh,
science. But then, crazy pivot that she had when she moved to Seattle after she got married, met the great Black artist Jacob Lawrence, and he asked her to work on a catalog project, like cataloging all of his works. That felt familiar to her from her science background of, because it's very process oriented and you're, just going through and itemizing, cataloging, searching. But that led to a career in the arts and charity. And she's now a philanthropic advisor to high net worth individuals, basically
okay.
telling people with a lot of money where to give it to people who need it
Yeah, yeah.
more than they do.
Yeah, I was thinking, wait a minute, she's a real Grey's Anatomy in Seattle, Washington, and doing medicine. That's my show. Wait a minute.
Could have been her, could have been her, but she made that pivot.
So I want you to think about your career, the span of time from when you started to where you are today, and a moment in time that if you could redo it, you would. What advice would you give to yourself back then based off of what you know today?
I don't know that there are a lot of things that I like regrets on the career path. Um, but advice that I would give myself is to lighten up because I was pretty intense, internally intense. I think like when I mentioned before, I hadn't, really had any like big challenges or outside forces telling me I wasn't good enough or couldn't do something. I had plenty of that internally. And I've thought a lot over the last several years, like trying to figure out the origin of that because it didn't come from, parents or family that was always drilling into me, like, you have to be perfect or you have to be this or you need to have this job. They were always like, do whatever you want to do. You can do whatever you want to do. We've got your back. And you being happy, that's all we care about. So,
Mm-hmm.
but inside, I was feeding myself these messages of like, I have to be excellent. I think I overly internalized that 110%. And that could lead to a lot of imposter syndrome or times when I was good at least at faking it on the outside because I kind of have a poker face, I guess, or a calmness. I always think it's kind of resting bitch face. It seemed like I had some people kind of scared be like that. But I was very serious because I wanted to be taken seriously as a woman, as a Black woman. I looked younger, like people always thought I was younger than I was. I think I still do at 50.
You
But
look good. You look good, girl.
especially in my 20s, like, so I would overcompensate by always just being, really serious. And I look back now, I'm just like, girl, lighten up. It's like show some
Mm-hmm.
personality. And it took me several years into my career to start to do that. And it made a difference in, I was successful at work because people know I was a good worker, but I didn't really have any deep connections with people or people didn't really know me. And now when I give advice to young people, and I always say, boil it down to my 4 H's: hard work, honesty, humility, and I end it with humor. It's like, because no one wants to work for someone who's like, basically how like a pill, who's just always like only all about the work and serious and doesn't show some personality and give you an in or a way for someone to connect with you. So I would tell myself, my younger self, to just lighten up, because that also helps you be more comfortable with yourself. I was always trying to prove something.
So let's move into our next segment, which is I am bringing her to the table with me, and this is your opportunity to present virtual flowers to another woman, because you would not be where you are today without her fingerprint on your life.
So this was an interesting one, because when I saw, what this segment would be, and immediately was thinking in terms of like throughout my career. And again, like something that maybe is not as common, a lot of the big fingerprints on my professional side have come from male mentors or coworkers who I, I without my trying, like had proved myself to, or they were impressed by me or trusted me and wanted to invest in my continuation. And so I was thinking, I was like, but there must have been, like, along the way, there were definitely inspirational women, or that women that I would have contact with who would be supportive. But I wouldn't say like one who was, my ongoing mentor throughout things. So I wasn't sure how I was going to answer, but I have to take it back to family, and I would really say it's my sister. We're 4 years apart, but I think some of it, of what I was saying of like why I'm so hard on myself, or why I had been so hard on myself, I think when I finally got to the answer, some of it came from her influence in my life. She's very type A and very like, things are black and white. And she's very, I'm a Pisces, man, I can flow left or right fish. I'm a little bit looser with things. I'm a little bit more emotional. I'm the hugger in the family. My mom and I were the ones who are more, affectionate and physical in that way. And my sister, who has that side to her, but she's much more all about business, and messaged a lot when I was growing up and in my 20s. Like, Angela, like, you should be on top of things, and, make sure you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, like, all that type of stuff. And it used to feel like a lot of pressure, but I came to appreciate it, because it also came with a lot of support of her also, backing me up and saying like, you can do this. And then giving me very, clear instructions on how she thinks I should do it. And I think before I had my own confidence, when I would be in rooms, like, people ask me like, what's it like being the only woman, at the table, or the only Black person at the table? I'm like, well, I've been one of those things almost my entire life, just of how I grew up, where I grew up. Like, it doesn't throw me off. But if I would get nervous in a situation, I would channel my sister, like how she would handle it. And it would kind of just be automatic, like back goes up, postures up, and you're very clear in how you speak. And you're very, don't sugarcoat things with people. And I would have to like use her to be able to get through a situation. And then over time, I found my way of, being that type of assertive, and didn't need to do that. But her influence, both watching how she's navigated her career, how she has had tough, experiences, and being told she wasn't good enough, and really being in situations where being the only woman or the only Black person when she was still in science, like in a lab of white men telling her flat out, like, you don't belong here. And you cannot make any mistakes, because people are already looking at you like, what are you doing here? Like, what type of pressure does that put on somebody? So she learned how to navigate all that. And by watching her, I think that really helped develop how I wanted to be professionally. And then again, just that she's just always been there to support me. And now is my person that, if I have a long or frustrating day, or, dealing with something, with each new responsibility in the role I have now and just along the way, she's my sounding board of like, and I think I handled this right, or, you know, what's your opinion on this? And she's really my flower. All my flowers go to my big sister, Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie, we love you. That's nice. Okay, so now we're getting into my favorite segment of our conversation, and that is food is love. And my first question for you is what food best describes your personality and why?
Hmm. I'm going to go with lasagna because
Mm-hmm.
I'm layered, Tommy. I got a lot of layers and people don't always know like what's under there. And also it comes in all different varieties. People always think of the, traditional with the meat sauce and all that stuff. But again, having lived in Italy for 4 years, like all kinds of different types of lasagna. So I feel like I'm layered. I'm comforting and nourishing like a
Mm-hmm.
very good lasagna. Um, and that generally most people like. There's some outliers. May not be. It might be an acquired taste for some, but I feel like me and lasagna we're a match.
Okay. Has there ever been a time in your life where food was healing and comforting for you?
In those 2 years when I was not sure where my life was going, and again, just a little more context, I had left ABC at the same time that coincided with a breakup in my personal life. Because I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing next, I had downsized my gorgeous West Village apartment I loved so much, put all my stuff in storage, and sublet my friend's apartment. And so, like, didn't have any of my stuff. I felt like I didn't have my identity. I didn't have a job, and I had no man. Not that these were my identities. No man, no job, no man. I don't have my stuff. I'm like somebody else's house. And I started cooking. I hadn't really,
Mm-hmm.
I've always liked to cook, but I like to cook for people. So, making big meals or dinners for myself, I never really did that. Um, but I started just finding comfort. One, I started watching a lot of cooking shows because, like, well, not working, so you can only read so many books or go to the gym so many times, and started watching cooking shows, and that became a source of comfort and also just something to do in that time when I was still trying to figure out what's next. And then that time period led into my moving here in 2020, which happened to coincide. It wasn't because of COVID. I was actually coming out to LA for a job. I had two jobs lined up, but I landed on March 20th, which was the day that everything shut down. And
Mm.
so
Wow.
jobs went away, which meant the apartment that I had lined up. I was like, oh, well, I don't want to blow all my savings if I don't know when I'm going to work. So I moved in with the aforementioned parents at 40 something years old, which was interesting. But all during quarantine and lockdown, I was with them, and food became our escape. It became
Mm-hmm.
one, my purpose and my activity. Like I said, I feel like I have my purpose is to nourish or to give or to support. And, my mom had just gotten a cancer diagnosis as well. So we were, obviously like extra careful about, we had to stay inside, but just being really careful, like with her immune system. So I started cooking every single day. And some of it was, food that was meant to help support her as she started her cancer treatment. And then from there, it turned into how our escape, our voyage. I'm like, okay, tonight we're going to Korea, and I would got some like cool recipe of like a salted pork thing that's like from some restaurant in New York, or we would have like Italian night, and I would make a lasagna. Um, just everything. We were like all over the world, and I would start. I'm not a big social media person, and on my little small private Instagram would post my pictures and our little flags of where we were going tonight. And it was so comforting because one, they loved it. They couldn't wait. And, we would play like music from whatever country, the food was from, and just make it an experience because there wasn't anything else to do. So food became our connection and our escape.
You made your life a production. You
Hmm.
traveled, you made it a production.
Like themes. Yeah.
Yeah. Does your family have an heirloom recipe that is passed down from generation to generation?
Gumbo. So my dad's side of the family is from New Orleans, from Louisiana, um, and my grandmother in particular. And I don't know if it came from her mother, the recipe, but she kept hers secret for a long time until one day we looked up and it turns like she came with this little book like from the church parish where they had done a church cookbook, and she gave the recipe. She hadn't given it to gave the recipe to the church cookbooks. We're like, okay, well now
Was it the
everybody
real
has.
recipe?
I think she left out because her secret is like usually with gumbo, you either use filet or okra to thicken it. She uses both. So it kind of like adds a little something. So I think in the
Hmm.
version for the cookbook, I think she only put okra or something in there. But that's my sister has perfected it. I've done it, I think, once by myself. Other times I've done it like with my other grandmother, the one whose recipe it was. She taught my other grandmother. At one point, they lived together, like all four grandparents. Tell you, it was like a wonderful way of growing up. Taught my other grandmother how to make it. And so then she would get competitive, like, I can make it even better. So that's our heirloom recipe is gumbo. And we usually have it around Christmas or Thanksgiving.
Okay. Okay. So now this piece of our conversation surrounding food is it's a remix. And so I need for you to share your favorite game day meal food, and then I want you to give it the Angela remix that we're going to eat when we're sitting out on your lanai in this
Mhm.
oasis of a home that you have, enjoying it, watching that big screen TV.
I would say I like dips, but like hot dips. So there's this hot crab dip that I make. And my little secret thing in there is smoked paprika, but maybe that's not so secret. A lot of people do that. Then I just last season I added a corn, like a hot corn dip, which I didn't think I would like, because sometimes I don't really like corn. Oh my God, it's so good. But my favorite is a spinach artichoke dip. And you get all the different things that you can, use to scoop them with. But for the spinach artichoke, the little spin I like to put on it, I know for a lot of women, for Beyonce in particular, they got hot sauce in their purse. For me, it's truffle oil or anything truffle. Like as soon as I smell truffle, like that's my thing. So a little dab of truffle oil in there in the spinach artichoke dip in particular, in that one. Oh, that's it's a good way to watch the game. You'll be like kind of hunched over, asking for more. It's delicious.
Yes, I love all three of those dips. I would enjoy all of them. I know already just based off of the description. So I'm down. Anytime you call, I'm coming.
I'll send you the recipe as well because they are just they're they're fire.
Yes. Well, listen, Angela, I am so grateful that you took the opportunity to come and join me at the Stay a While table. Just know that you are welcome here anytime.
Thank you so much, Tommy. This has been a great conversation, great platform, and hopefully there are some takeaways that your listeners can get from it.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you felt the love and connection in today's conversation. Every woman you heard from has faced the impossible and emerged stronger. This is your personal invitation to stay a while longer at TommiV.com. That's TOMMIV.com for more inspiration for your mind, body, and soul. And let's not forget your belly. You're always welcome at my table. Please be sure to subscribe, make yourself at home, and stay a while.
Stay